Alright students, we are going to continue with the rise of nationalism in Europe, and in the previous slide we have understood, or rather discussed, how the things were in France. We took up France as the first nation for rise of nationalism in Europe, because France, the model that was adopted by the people of France, went a long way in actually deciding the course of action in the entire Europe. Okay, so the entire feeling of nationalism that developed in Europe was actually started from France. So we noticed a lot of changes that happened in France. There was this monarchical rule. The entire state of France was divided into three. That's something that we have actually studied in the 9th standard. Then how people rose up against the monarchical rule, then how the Jacobean club took over, and then finally Napoleon took over. So again the monarchical rule was again converted into dictatorship. Okay, so the monarchical rule, so after Jacobean there was directory, and then it was Napoleon who took over. So there were a lot of transitions that were happening. So the reason why we would emphasize, or why we have discussed Napoleon, is because Napoleon, although being a dictator, he laid down the foundation of democracy. The way he managed entire France was indeed great in terms of laying down the foundations of democracy. Okay, so now we are going to study about other countries and other nations which were involved in this nationalism. Now first of all, we need to understand nations. When I am saying other nations, nations had not developed. The concept of nations was not there because people didn't have a collective identity in the entire Europe. Okay, so everything was lying here and there in bits and pieces. Okay, people didn't have a collective identity. At one point of time they are being ruled by one type of ruler, and then the other ruler takes over. So there is a lot of I would say there is a lot of topsy-turvy and humdrum in this entire context. Okay, so there is no specific nation, and all, so since there is no specific nation, there is no particular nationalism as well. So we will try and understand what was the background of the entire Europe when this nationalism was developing in bits and pieces. Okay, so here we are trying to discuss the advent of nationalism in Europe. Okay, so the advent of nationalism in Europe, there was no collective identity. Okay, nearest identity was religion, culture or language. People didn't have a collective identity. For example, what do we mean by a collective identity? I am an Indian first, and then after that, the reason why I am an Indian is because I have born in India, I have the citizenship of India, and so my identity of being a Hindu or a Muslim comes later. My identity of being an Indian comes first. Okay, because I belong to this country, India. Okay, but at that point of time, people didn't have a collective identity. People didn't belong to a nation. People didn't belong to a ruler. Okay, so they didn't have a collective identity. This collective identity was missing. The only identity that people can correlate to was their religion, the language that they spoke, and some amount of culture that they had. Okay, so there was no sense of collective identity amongst all the people who were in Europe. Okay, irrespective of whatever regions they belong to, there was no collective identity at all. So that is one glitch that was there. So during the mid 18th century, Europe was divided into several small kingdoms and principalities. Okay, so during this mid 18th century, Europe was divided into small kingdoms, very small kingdoms and principalities. So very small kingdoms and principalities Europe was divided into. Okay, and no concept of nation state. Now what do we mean by the entire Europe was divided into small fragments basically. Okay, the Europe that we say today, which has proper demarcated boundaries of all nations, Austria, Switzerland, Germany, and all those nations that are there in Europe, that's not how Europe existed at that point of time. It was divided into small fragments basically. Okay, and all these fragments were ruled by different rulers. Okay, so during the mid 18th century, Europe was divided into several small kingdoms and principalities. Okay, so there were different small kingdoms, different small fragments that the entire continent of Europe was divided into. No concept of nation state. Now what do we mean by a nation state? a state that establishes itself as a separate political and geographical identity and functions as a complete and sovereign territorial unit. Okay. For example, right now India is a nation state. All the countries that exist in today's world are a nation state, which will have proper boundaries. They have a proper political system. Okay, they have a proper geographical identity. So if I belong to Jammu and Kashmir, still I am an Indian. If I belong to Tamil Nadu, still I am an Indian. Okay, because that is falling within the geographical boundaries of India. So a state that establishes itself as a separate political and geographical identity. So there is a separate political and geographical identity in that state and functions as a complete and sovereign territorial unit. This functions as a complete sovereign, independent. Okay, it functions as a complete independent sovereign and territorial unit. Okay, so that's what a nation state is. A nation state is that. Okay, now people from diverse ethnic groups, now in at that point of time in Europe, people from diverse ethnic groups lived in Eastern and Central Europe. So they lived in Eastern and Central Europe. So these were people who belong to different diverse groups, okay, diverse ethnic groups, okay, and they lived in Eastern and Central Europe. The prominent empires in Europe, there were basically two prominent empires. Ethnic groups means there were different religious and cultural groups that existed at that point of time. So the entire Europe was divided into groups, not particular nations. Okay, so there were different ethnic groups that lived in Eastern and Central Europe. Here we are trying to understand the background of Europe before nationalism actually took over. Okay, so there was the prominent empires in Europe were two. One was the Ottoman Empire. Now what was the Ottoman Empire? We have studied a little bit of this Ottoman Empire in the Khilafat movement that we had in while we were studying nationalism in India. So Khilafat movement was basically a movement which was concerned or connected to the Caliph. Caliph is basically what? A former Turkish empire ruled by the Caliph, the spiritual and temporal head of the Muslims. Okay, so the Muslim community had this Caliph who was basically their spiritual head, and that is basically in Turkey. Okay, so a former Turkish empire ruled by Caliph, the spiritual and temporal head of Muslims. Okay, so this Ottoman Empire ruled over Eastern and Central Europe, and so this was basically this ruled over Eastern and Central Europe. Okay, this Ottoman Empire. Then we had the Habsburg Empire. Okay, so we had the Ottoman Empire and the Habsburg Empire, the empire that ruled Austria, Hungary, including Alpine regions of Tyrol, Austria and Sudetenland and Bohemia. So these are certain countries that are there. Okay, it looks a little complicated, but this is how the entire group was divided. It was divided into Ottoman Empire and the Habsburg Empire. So the Habsburg Empire was the empire that ruled Austria. Okay, Austria is a country right now. Hungary and the Alpine. Alpine is basically the mountain ranges, Alps, what we say in Europe. Alpine regions of Tyrol, Austria, Sudetenland and Bohemia. So this was how the entire Europe was there at that point of time. So before nationalism came in and took over, and before it started getting segregated into states, this was the position of Europe at that point of time. So we have studied or discussed what happened in France, what happened under Napoleon, how the Napoleon Code was introduced and how it took over, how the nationalistic feelings arose. Now we are trying to understand and correlate it to the entire Europe, okay, how the entire continent of Europe was divided and how people arose for nationalism. So you can take a snapshot of the same. This is just explaining the background of Europe. Okay, so now we are going to carry forward with the concept of, one second here, concept of nationalism in Europe. Okay, so we saw how the structure of Europe was. Now how did this concept of nationalism arose in Europe? That's something that we are going to study. So first of all, the entire community of Europe was actually getting divided into two basic communities, that is the middle class and the aristocratic class. Okay, now we will understand what is rise of conservatism and revolutionaries. Okay, but before that we need to understand the emergence of two different classes in the entire continent of Europe, and one was the aristocratic class, okay, and the other one was the rise of the new middle class, okay. So the new middle class and the aristocratic class. So there were two broad categories of people across Europe. The aristocratic class, they were basically the rich landed aristocracy, okay, means that mostly the kings and the noblemen, okay, the kings and the noblemen and their families, okay. Now understand this, it's like this, okay. So maybe there are two different countries, but the kings and noblemen of a particular country have a particular amount of wealth and a particular amount of fame with them, so they are not able to correlate and connect with their people, but they are able to correlate and connect with people outside their region or country. So the kings of one particular region will basically be in quite connected to the kings of the other particular region, okay. That's how the aristocratic class developed. So the aristocratic class, the rich landed aristocracy, basically kings and noblemen family across Europe. So these were kings and noblemen's family across Europe. They were more or less united as a class despite geographical differences. So although there were a lot of geographical differences, but they were still united as a class, okay. They were more or less united as a class despite having geographical differences, okay. So generally spoke, they most of them, although they spoke other languages like German and Italian as well, but most of them generally spoke French. For example, if I give an example, Louis XVI, that was something that you studied in the 9th standard, and his wife, okay, Maria Antoinette. So his wife was basically from Austria, and Louis XVI was basically from France. They got married. How? Because there were basically ties of marriage between these communities. Although the kings and noblemen were from different regions with different geographical boundaries, but somehow they were connected to each other, okay. So there were ties of marriage. So Louis XVI not only married the Austrian princess Maria Antoinette, but when he required the army, he actually approached the Austrian army, okay, for help when he wanted to defeat the Estates General. So he took help from the Austrian army and they gave him the help, okay. So that's how the ties were between the rich and aristocratic classes, okay. So there was something common between them. Most of them spoke French, okay. So across the entire European community, the rich and aristocratic class, people who belong to this rich and aristocratic class, that is the kings and the noblemen's family, most of them spoke French. So language is one binding factor, okay. They employed serfdom, basically they employed common people, okay, to run their states. They were connected by ties of marriage, as I explained, or as I rather gave an example which you have studied in the earlier 9th standard as well. There's Louis XVI and his wife hailed from Austria, okay. So but they were numerically a pretty much smaller group, okay. Obviously the kings and noblemen very much smaller in number in all regions, so they were numerically a smaller group. However, they were interconnected with each other across the entire European continent. Now the new middle class, okay. So before we understand new middle class, we need to understand what is conservatism, okay. So conservatism is basically a political philosophy and there was an emergence of conservatism. So how did this conservatism and when did this conservatism evolve in the European community? So a political philosophy that stressed the importance of tradition, established institutions and customs, and preferred gradual development to quick change, okay. So now why did this happen? Because if you see the Napoleon Code, he brought some drastic changes and he started implementing those changes in whichever regions he actually conquered or covered, okay. So people welcomed him as a Messiah, but as we saw, the same people who were in favor of him, at the end of the day they became against him, okay. So there were certain reasons for that, but he wanted a quick change. So leaders understood that whatever changes Napoleon is trying to inculcate is being welcomed by the people. However, he is trying to bring it very fast. So in that case, they slowed down. What these leaders did was they preferred gradual development to a quick change, and that is how conservatism started. Conservative, understand, see, when I say I belong to a conservative family, it means that the religion part or the customs part or the traditional part of the my family is very strong. Okay, so conservative family means I would have a traditional approach, my family would have a very conservative approach. Okay, not very open minded, not very accustomed to change. Even if change happens, that will happen very gradually, not very quick. Okay, so that's called conservative. So that's conservative family, and in the same way conservative nation. So conservatism is basically a political philosophy that stressed the importance of tradition, established institutions and customs, and preferred gradual development to quick change. That was the rise of so across the European community after the defeat of Napoleon Bonaparte in 1815 in the Battle of Waterloo. Okay, after which he was sent to exile, the European government adopted the idea of conservatism. So the entire European community and the government adopted the idea of conservatism. So the growth of industries, growth of commercial class. Now what has happened here is this also marks the period of industrial revolution across Europe. So industries started getting developed, minerals started getting discovered, and their use was also discovered. So people were developing industries, so they needed a huge amount of people. Okay, so the new middle class believed in freedom and equality of individuals before the law. How did this happen? How, why, and why this change happened? The same people who were employed as serfs or laborers or peasants or farmers, how did this change happen? Now these people started getting employed in these factories, in these industries. Okay, so there was a huge need of these type of people. Okay, so since there was a huge need, the growth of commercial class, so basically what happened is the growth of industry started, gave rise to educated liberal middle class. Now money started coming in. See, we will talk about education when there is sufficient food on table. Okay, the peasants, the laborers and the farmers were in such a miserable condition that they never thought about education. But now, since they are getting involved in these industries and they are setting up these industries, they are also getting involved in setting up these industries. So they are not only working there as laborers or serfs, but they are also owning these industries. Okay, so these industries are now getting owned by these people. Okay, so now they are becoming virtual owners of these industries. So obviously money will money has to come in, and once money starts coming in, then they will try to educate their children, and that's when the rational thought process comes in. When people get educated, they start reading things, they start exploring things, and they start understanding the rational. Okay, so now they are trying, or rather now they are decoding the tactics that the rulers have adopted in order to keep them suppressed. So now there is a lot of awareness amongst the new liberal middle class which arose. So as you can see that the entire community was divided into aristocratic and the middle class, and now the middle class is emerging. Although the aristocratic class across the European continent is quite tied up amongst each other, but the middle class is also simultaneously rising. The income is increasing, and they are also getting educated, and they are also acquiring a rational approach to things. Okay, so we will see more changes that are happening in the entire European continent in the next slides. You can take a snapshot of the same. Okay, so we are now going to cover how the concept of liberalism, basically rose in entire Europe. Okay, so what does basically liberalism mean? We understand liberal thinking means open-minded thinking. Okay, a free thinking basically. Okay, so in Latin, the word liber means free. It means free. Okay, so liberalism means free thinking, not a thinking which is basically influenced by other factors. Okay, it is a rational thinking, it is a free thinking. Okay, so it is what is basically liberal nationalism. It is a form of nationalism which means individual freedom. Okay, individual freedom to decide, on things, to decide about one's life, what he or she wants to do in life. That's called liberalism. Okay, not by compulsion. So let's say in India, we had a society in which the farmer's son compulsively has to be a farmer. He doesn't have any other options left. Okay, so that's not liberalism. When you are free to choose your career, when you are free to choose your business, when you are free to choose the place you are working, when you are free to choose the kind of income that you will be generating, that's called liberalism. Okay, so it means individual freedom. Now these concepts were emerging because more and more people were getting educated. As I said, rise of middle class. Okay, so since middle class saw money coming in, they started investing in education, and when they started investing in education, it automatically cultivated a rational approach towards all the spheres of life. Okay, so hence we call it individual freedom. Then we have equality before law. So before law, everyone will be equal. It doesn't matter whether you belong to a king's family, whether you belong to a nobleman's family, or you belong to a poor peasant's family. You are equal before the law. Okay, so government by consent. Okay, when you are choosing the government, when we are able to choose the government by consent means voting and all. Okay, democracy basically. Government is not impulsive. I mean, it's not a hereditary form of government. It's not a dynasty form of government. It's a government chosen by consent. Freedom of markets. Okay, so we have freedom of markets. We are free to choose our markets. Abolition of state imposed restrictions on the movement of goods and capital. Now see, the freedom of markets, this is basically from a business point of view, and hence we will discuss this in detail out here, wherein the economic impacts of liberalism. So we are trying to understand the concept of liberalism in two aspects: the political impacts that it created, or the political revolution that it brought, and the economic revolution that it brought. So the trade was very much restricted. We need to understand one thing: no matter how much efficient a government is, if the economic reforms are not well, or if people are not able to generate money, business is not supported, that's not going to last forever. Okay, so economic structure of a country is the backbone of development of a country, okay, or a region. So liberalism was targeting this economic reforms by freedom of markets and abolition of state imposed restrictions. Now what were these state imposed restrictions? So obviously, if there is a country A, there is a country B, and there is a country C. Now if the businessmen are supposed to sell or even regions, okay, if the businessmen are supposed to sell their products to a region of C, then he has to go through restrictions that are there in this border, the restrictions that are there in this border, and these restrictions were huge. Okay, so there were a lot of restrictions on the movement of goods and capital, which liberalism fought and overcame. Okay, so there were differences. These differences were there in the movement of goods and services, and there were also differences in the units that were used to measure, okay, weights and the units of weights and measurements. As we have seen, Napoleon had tried to standardize the units of weights and measurement, because that's a basic problem of all businessmen. So any businessman or any trader would not like to just be confined to his or her own region. They would try to explore and expand, and if they want to explore and expand, although globalization was not the concept at that point of time, but if they try to explore and expand, the first challenge that they faced was in crossing these barriers, or of moving their goods, and the second challenge they faced was difference in the units of measurements and weights. So at a particular region, the weights are measured in a different way, and a particular region, the weights are measured in a different way, and when that happens, you suffer losses. Okay, so in spite of your product being not bad, but still you will suffer losses, because the units of weights and measurements are different in a particular region. So there was an urgent need to standardize all these units of weights and measurements. So there were differences in units of weights and measurements, because of which economic liberalism demanded for unified economic territory. Unified economic territory means that although the territory will have its own boundaries, but it will be unified in terms of trade. Okay, so they fought for a cause in which, although they were separated by different boundaries and regions, but the trade of goods and services would have uniformity. So you will not have high taxes on this end and very low taxes here. No, that's not how it will happen. Okay, so demand for uniform unified economic territory, a trade union was made. So a trade union was basically made. So trade union basically fights for the rights of the people who are involved in that trade, and that's how the concept of Zollverein developed. Okay, now what is Zollverein? A custom unified form in 1834 at the initiative of Prussia. Prussia was a country. Okay, so this was basically a custom union. This is basically a union that was formed, a trade union that was formed on the initiative of Prussia. So it also abolished trade barriers and reduced the number of currencies from 30 to 2. So again, this was another challenge. So there were trade barriers, high taxes, and different types of taxes were imposed at different locations, and also there were different currencies that were involved. A particular region had a different form of currency, the other region has a different form of currency. Today also we have it, but today things are pretty much normalized, which means that you can use we have international debit cards. So automatically your currency gets converted to where you are swiping your card. Okay, if you are going outside India or to a different location, then automatically, so this has eased out the trade. But at that point of time, these things were not there. So this Zollverein, they worked upon these two things, that is reducing the currency from 30 currencies, it reduced it to 2. Okay, so this was basically a trade union that was formed in 1834. The first thing it worked upon was to release the trade barriers that were there at that point of time in moving from different regions in selling your goods and services, and also worked out reduce the number of currencies for trade from 30 to 2. Okay, so that was there. If you look at the political scenario, okay, now individual freedom or equality before law, this is basically something related to the political structure, not the economic structure. So equality before law, how do we impose equality before law? So the first thing that we need to see here is that the government that is elected, just as we have here, government by consent. So these three are basically correlating to the political structure. Okay, so equality before law, that is suffrage. Suffrage, what does suffrage means? The right to vote in political elections. Suffrage means the right to, the first step of a democratic rule is to ensure that a government that is formed in a particular region, country or state is basically a democratic form of government, which is the direct involvement of people in electing that government. Okay, so the people are deciding which government they want to have above them. Okay, so these were things. This was liberal nationalism. If you look into it, this is the entire structure of liberal nationalism at that point of time. Okay, you can take a snapshot of the same.